From basic to headache-inducing, the football boot has seen some crazy changes since the game was introduced. We're going to look at this evolution from the very first boots all the way through to the mad design seen in the modern game and all the highlights in between. It might seem odd at first when you think about it, but it makes sense the first person to wear a pair of football boots was Henry VIII. The guy had a string of women, money, and power, and pretty much did whatever he wanted, just like your modern footballer. The English king was thought to be a fan of the early version of the game, even though he wanted to ban it because of the riots it caused. It's thought the monarch ordered some boots to be made from Italian leather, although it's unlikely they included studs. The shoes, ordered in 1526, were found in an inventory of the greedy king when he died, probably along with a few chicken drumsticks and a wife or two. Historians believe he ordered the boots so he could take part in a match on Shrove Tuesday, the one day of the year when the game was traditionally played. No doubt he only wanted to play to try and get a free pancake at half-time. The game went underground after it was banned for wiping out countless pigs' bladders as well as rural towns. When it made a less physical comeback in the 19th century, the game started to become more standardised and professional, but this hadn't spread to boots yet. Before 1891, players wore work boots instead of any designed specifically for the game. These had all the agility of a bulldozer and all the weight of Henry VIII during the banquet years. They weren't designed for people to run in or kick a ball with. Instead, they had steel toe caps, which led to injuries when one player accidentally, or not so accidentally, kicked another. They also didn't have any kind of additional grip, since there was a regulation that footballers couldn't wear any shoes with anything sticking out from them. Studs would have to wait. Moulded blades were a thing of sorcery. The rules were changed in 1891, and this let boots use small bars or studs on the shoes. Soon after that, work boots were replaced with actual football boots designed for actual football, and these were made with leather in order to perform better in the sport. These still weren't exactly lightweight, as they were made of thick leather. They were about half a kilogram dry and heavier if wet, but they were laced up to the ankle for better protection. This was the start of the modern football boot as we know today. But we were still a world away from sponsorship deals, especially as all these boots look the same. Decades later, in the 1920s, the Dassler brothers created models close to what we know now as football boots. These two would become important figures even to this day, as one would create Adidas and the other would birth Puma, the brand, not the cat. This was after they split following a classic brotherly argument. While still talking to each other, the Dasslers started the first customization of the football boot with interchangeable latches depending on the type of field played on. This was on top of a better design of leather with steel studs and nails on the sole for traction, and presumably for more injuries. The shoes were also made lighter and less like having lead weights tied to your soles, like someone about to enter a river after crossing the mafia. Because of the understandable distraction of 2 world wars, football boots took a back seat for a while in favour of avoiding global destruction instead. After this all settled down, developers and players took an interest in the sport and the footwear again. The boots became even lighter as most manufacturers were less concerned with protection and more on performance. Besides this, these new boots also came a little lower on the leg to promote flexibility, just like yoga, but less preachy. These lower boots were popular in places like Southern Europe and South America, where conditions weren't akin to a pig's playground like England. The next milestone came in the 50s, when Adidas introduced their own football boot that came with interchangeable screw-in studs. These were either rubber or plastic and were specifically made to be used in different conditions. Gone were the days where you had to throw out your old shoes as soon as the sun came out. The custom boot was starting to take shape. Later, we'll see how this would take over the whole industry. Up until the 70s, boots were fairly universal and boring, but that was all about to change in a big way. Companies started to realise that the game's stars could sell their shoes. They also started to realise that making more eye-catching designs could get people to part with their cash. For anyone under 20, that's the 70s version of Bitcoin. During the 1970 World Cup in Mexico, companies Adidas and Puma, the 2 rivals I mentioned earlier, that came from a brotherly row, called a truce and agreed not to carry out marketing actions with the Brazilian superstar Pelé. The only issue was Puma lied and didn't hold up their end of the bargain. Before the quarter-final between Brazil and Peru, Pelé asked the referee to postpone kickoff for a few seconds to tie his boots, Pumas. Because this was the first World Cup broadcast to the world in colour, this acted like a giant billboard of the shoes, and I imagine Adidas weren't best pleased. Twinned with the potential for players to flog boots, colours started to become experimented with. The first white boots and the first non-black pair were the idea of Hummel's marketing director, Brian Hewitt. They were worn by Everton's Alan Ball in the 1970 Charity Shield match. This prompted the commentator to call him Twinkle Toes, which is a lot better than White Feet. Derby's Alan Hinton risked Brian Clough's wrath for the money offered to wear these boots as well. He was paid a whole £1,000 for one of the earliest boot deals ever seen. For context, the human jumping bean Neymar got £23 million for his latest deal with Puma. That's especially expensive when you realise he spends most of his time in the air. In the 70s and 80s, you'd have thought more outlandish footwear on the pitch would take off alongside the more outlandish kits and clothing seen off it. But coloured boots were still a bit of a novelty. In fact, in the 1994 World Cup final, all the players still wore black boots. This would be the last time this would happen in this event. However, this game would cement a modern icon, the black and white Tiempo, courtesy of Nike, who at this point had been lurking in the shadows of the boot world. A lucrative deal with the Brazil team at the time would put an end to that. It was the largest contract between a sports equipment company and a national football team for the period. But although the Tiempo is a classic, there was one boot in the 90s that would revolutionise the industry, and that, of course, is the Predator. Its origin story would be born out of tragedy. Former Liverpool and Middlesbrough midfielder Craig Johnston was forced to retire early in 1988 when his sister became ill. He went back to Australia to care for her, and while coaching a group of kids, the former pro came up with the idea of adding rubber fins to their boots. At the time, the distinctive ridges had never been seen before, giving the kind of swerve and power players had been having inappropriate dreams about. After plenty of prototypes and sleepless nights trying to get the design together, he finally got his boots to manufacturers who all promptly rejected him. He convinced two German legends, one being Franz Beckenbauer, to wear his creation during a kick-around in the snow, and this was enough to convince Adidas to take a gamble. 30 years later, and we can safely say it paid off. Although the boot was an instant hit, shown by John Collins curling a free kick into the top corner for Celtic against Rangers at Ibrox in April 1994, it wasn't until the partnership with David Beckham that the boots cemented themselves into the stratosphere. This was helped massively when Becks himself launched the ball into its own stratosphere and over backpedaling Wimbledon keeper Neil Sullivan on the opening day of the 96-97 Premier League season. This goal was scored with the first Predators that had an overlapping tongue to give more of a strike zone, and the Man United number 7 was more than happy to make use of all of it. Towards the end of the decade, bold colours and designs were more commonplace, with the Nike Mercurial R9 being associated with pre-fat original Ronaldo. There was also a big change in the design that all boots would follow, as the sole was designed to be more flexible and allow the footballer more movement. This would pave the way for the modern era. The actual functional design of the football boots hasn't changed a huge amount since the turn of the millennium, but the look of them has seen some striking entries into the boot world, for better or worse. The Predator has been a mainstay in this world, and has gone through its own evolution over the years, while cementing itself as the boot you need for technical skills. Nike's Mercurial range has been its main rival, and has taken up the marketing angle of speed and power. It's no surprise then Adidas have had Messi as their poster boy, with Nike teaming up with Ronaldo to sell as many boots as possible. On top of this, these stars have also released their own range of limited edition boots, which would further their own brand as well as their parent company. It's a win-win situation, unless you're the wallet of a parent. The new century introduced laser technology that meant the boots could be customised fully for the first time. This has led to even the worst Sunday League player being able to put their own name and number on their feet bags if they want. As the 2010s progressed, studs started to fall out of favour, and blades became the standard choice for footballers at all levels. Then in more recent years, tweaks have been made to try to improve performance, or at least so that sports companies can say on their marketing they're trying to improve performance. This includes layering of thin upper materials or the increased responsiveness of sole plates seen with the Nike AeroTrack and Adidas Gore-Tex speed frame, apparently. As with kits, boots have also seen a resurgence in retro designs. Remakes of iconic boots from the past decades have been more common than a VAR mistake. And some of these designs have just been pure copies of older icons, further adding to the case that the 90s was the best decade of all time, ignoring all the pastel. The ease of which boots could be customised in the modern era has led to some horrific offerings for various reasons. The Adidas Copa Gore-Tex Mid was voted the worst boot of 2018, presumably for looking like something found in the bargain section of an army surplus store. Or the seizure-inducing Puma Evo Speed SL, which was officially stated as lasting only 10 games on the outsole. Then there's of course the second limited edition of the Adizero F50, courtesy of Japanese fashion designer Yohji Yamamoto, and pushed by Gareth Bale, aka the boot used as the primary reason your dad says phrases like, "the game is gone."